Hello everyone, my name is Abigail King, and I did my Psychology Senior Seminar Research Project on creativity and mental illness and the real link between those two variables. The purpose of this study is to expand upon previous research and analyze the directional relationship between the two variables. This study exists to analyze the questions of, are creative individuals more likely to suffer from mental illness? Or are people with mental illnesses more likely to be creative or participate in creative activities? Are there similarities between creative characteristics and the characteristics of mental health disorders, such as general anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, and/or bipolar disorder? And which characteristics could be a predictor or a correlation between creativity and mental illness? Research studies on the association between mental illness and creativity have documented various results. Many studies found mixed results, with some identifying clear, positive evidence linking creativity and mental illness, while others found no evidence or unclear findings. Erica Larinen and colleagues studied the link between mental disorder and creative ability. Through literature and empirical research, their data concluded that there was little consensus on the exact link between those two variables. Two methods of study have been used to form a connection between creativity and mental illness in past studies. Number 1, studies of creative professionals and other highly creative individuals to find if they displayed a higher prevalence or indication of mental illnesses within the general public. Or, number 2, studies of people that are seen as mentally ill or to suffer from severe mental illness and find whether they are unusually creative. Creative activity is shown to be prevalent in individuals with mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder, especially during episodes of mania or severe high, but creativity is actually shown to significantly decrease during episodes of severe illness or depression. Other research findings promote a negative relationship between creativity and mental illness as well, as it supports the idea that creativity is hindered by the prevalence of mental illness, developed specifically from trauma from one's childhood. Research from a clinical study has shown that specifically bipolar disorder is shown with a significant prevalence in creative individuals. It also supported that creative individuals are most effective and efficient in their creative works and processes when their symptoms are at bay. They're managed and well controlled. After extensive research, it is hypothesized that creative individuals are not more likely to suffer from mental health disorders. Individuals with general anxiety disorder are not more likely to be creative. There is a negative correlation between individuals suffering from anxiety and being creative. Individuals who suffer from major depressive disorder are not more likely to be creative. There is a negative correlation between depression and creativity. Individuals with bipolar disorder are more likely to be creative. And there are similarities and a positive relationship between creative characteristics and the characteristics of bipolar disorder. The measures that were used during this study were as follows. Personal facets, including hyperactivity, were measured with the ADHD self-report scale. This is an 18-item scale that was used to measure participant hyperactivity levels over the past 6 months. The mood disorder questionnaire is a 16-item scale that was used to measure symptoms of bipolar disorder. The depression anxiety stress scale was also used, and that is a 21-item scale with 3 sets of self-report scales designed to measure the emotional states of depression, anxiety, and stress. And the Kaufman Domains of Creativity scale is a 50-item study, and it is a set of 5 self-report scales designed to measure the various types of creativity: everyday, scholarly, performance, science, and the arts of creativity. There was a total of 91 participants, all aged over 18, that were sampled using a convenience sample selected from Maryville SONA systems and social media, specifically Facebook. A total of 80% of the total participants were female, only 13% were male, and 5% were third-party non-binary. 84% of participants identified as white, 8% identified as Black African American, 2% identified as Asian, 2% identified as Hispanic or Latino, and 1% identified as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. Participants completed an online self-report survey about their creative abilities and mood or actions during specific situations. The research findings are as follows. 3 of the hypotheses were supported, however, 4 of the original hypotheses were not. As you can see in Table 1, so in order to test the hypothesis that creative people are not more likely to suffer from mental health disorders, a correlation was used. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which creative people also associated with mental health disorders. As predicted, the original hypothesis was supported. A Pearson correlation indicated a significant negative relationship between creativity and mental illness, with a R value of negative 0.229 and a p-value of 0.029. Participants who scored higher on the creativity scale for everyday creativity specifically, which is the type of creativity that is more genetic and more prone to be born with. On average, those people scored significantly lower on the mental illness scales. Referring to Table 2, to test the hypothesis that individuals with general anxiety disorder are not more likely to be creative, as well as the hypothesis that there is a negative correlation between individuals suffering from anxiety and being creative, a Pearson correlation was used. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which levels and facets of anxiety related to levels and facets of creativity. A Pearson correlation indicated a significant, small, positive relationship between creativity and anxiety with a correlation coefficient of 0.210 and a p-value of 0.046. In reference to Table 3, in order to test the hypothesis that individuals who suffer from major depressive disorder are not more likely to be creative, as well as the hypothesis that there is a negative correlation between depression and creativity, a correlation was used. Specifically, this test measured the degree to which levels and facets of depression related to levels and facets of creativity. A Pearson correlation indicated a significant, small, positive relationship between creativity and depression with a correlation coefficient of 0.251 and a p-value of 0.017. Referencing Table 4, to test the hypotheses that individuals with bipolar disorder are more likely to be creative, and also to test that there are similarities and positive correlation between creative characteristics and characteristics of bipolar disorder, correlations were used. Specifically, these tests measured the degree to which levels and facets of bipolar disorder and hyperactivity related to levels and facets of creativity. As predicted, the original hypotheses were supported. A Pearson correlation indicated a non-significant, small, positive relationship between creativity and bipolar disorder, with a correlation coefficient of 0.053 and a p-value of 0.618. A Pearson correlation indicated a non-significant, small, positive relationship between creativity and hyperactivity, with a correlation coefficient of 0.092 and a p-value of 0.388. Discussing these research findings, Cropley found that creativity may be prevalent in individuals with mental illness. He said that particularly with bipolar disorder and during those episodes of mania or severe high, but that creativity actually decreased during episodes of severe illness or depression. However, this is not supported by the current study, as the current study, the results showed that there is actually a positive relationship between depression and creativity, as well as anxiety and creativity. The results from the study also supported a positive correlation between anxiety and creativity, as well as depression, as participants who tested higher for anxiety and depression tested higher on the creativity scale. So according to previous studies like Hare's, this is reasonable, as he believes that there is a definite link between creativity and insanity or mental health disorders, no matter what type. However, this current study, the results are in direct opposition of some research findings by Jeffrey Garfield, where he states that creativity helps the mind focus and actually releases dopamine, a natural antidepressant, so that decreases depression, stress, and anxiety. However, again, as seen in the current study, those who scored higher for stress, anxiety, and depression actually scored higher on their creativity scores. So this kind of leaves the questions of, does mental illness result from high levels of creativity or genius? Or does increased levels of creativity result from mental illness? In which direction does the link between these two variables exist? There are some limitations to the current study. As with previous studies, they are very similar in they contain a flaw and a limitation in the quality of research methodology. But with previous studies, it was based on the fact that they had only focused on creative individuals or only individuals with mental health disorders. But in this instance, it is a self-report survey, which is not independently verified. It cannot be. So that makes it very difficult to verify those results that someone has put in. Also, it's a convenience sampling. So sampling bias and selection bias are a part of that. Why someone decided to choose to take this study will not be known, if they got credit, if they didn't. So definitely a little bit of bias there. In order to eliminate those limitations, future research could expand on having an experiment with medically sound testing for both creativity and mental health disorders, and really knowing the lifetime prevalence and severity of mental illness to just build upon and give a more solid score to those samples, and also having a controlled sample that represents more of the general population, as 80% of our participants were female and only 13 were male. There is no way to know if these specific results are geared more towards a female population and if they would be any different if they were geared towards a male population.